Reimagining of the iconic Mattel toy Masters of Universe slash TV series from the 80s is making its return to the big screen. Does this film live up to the hype, or is it another rehashing of an IP that we've seen over and over again? Let's break it down. What I loved about this, the casting of both Nicolas Gazette as He-Man and Jared Leto as Skeletor. Both characters throughout this entire film do a good job of making these characters grounded and realistic and likable. And you see that throughout the entire film. One aspect that I really enjoyed was that they made the character, you get to see He-Man as a child living on Eternia. But when he comes to Earth for the first time, it's not like his memory gets wiped or anything. He knows his identity, he knows who he is, he just doesn't know how to get back to his home planet. So he spends his whole childhood and his whole adulthood in Earth, trying to figure out a way to get back to his home planet. And I thought that was a very clever thing to do to make this character more relatable and more grounded. You have to understand that He-Man is sort of this buff, good-looking, powerful, strong, cool character, and they were trying to figure out a way to make him more grounded and make him more relatable, so sort of like the average person can see themselves on the big screen. And you do feel that connection throughout the entire film. Another character who I thought was the best part of the whole movie was Skeletor, particularly his look, his design. Probably one of my most favorite designed villains I've seen in quite some time, where even he has a really intimidating, daunting look, but also is very funny. And I thought Jared Leto, who played Skeletor, lived up to the hype. I thought he was the best aspect of the entire film, and you felt his sort of anger and his want for power and control throughout the entire film. I think my biggest criticism of Masters of the Universe is that this film felt very formulaic and felt like it had a blueprint, and they were trying to copy and emulate films that were successful from the past. At some point, as I was watching the film, when we got to Eternia and we saw some other set piece that you see throughout the entire film, it feels like you're watching a Marvel film that came out 10 years ago, right? There are specific scenes that it feels almost directly copied from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And if I knew exactly what this movie was, right? They wanted to make Masters of the Universe film, but it's Marvelized, right? It doesn't feel like its own world. It feels like it's just copying other things that were successful in the past. Now, there are certain things that are different, the way the characters are approached and the world building, little aspect, but overall, this movie doesn't take risks and doesn't take chances in trying to move the needle on a franchise that's an iconic franchise from the 80s. Instead, it tries to emulate films that were already successful. Like, I know the people that made this movie had seen these Marvel films that came out 10 years ago. They didn't choose to try to do something different. They choose to take the safe path and try to copy something over and over again. And I think that's ultimately the big flaw of the movie, is tonally, it feels very copycat, and the pacing is also an issue. The movie starts off fast. When they get you into Eternia, you're there right away. You feel like you're in that world, and then they take you to Earth for 15 years, and then they bring you back. That's basically the structure of the film, and it happens very fast, very quick. The action sequences, particularly in the beginning, are very, very good. It does tend to slow down towards the middle, but it picks up very much at the end, particularly at the very end. Another issue that I think people are going to have while watching this film is the humor. The humor doesn't necessarily mix as well with the action that I would like to have seen. You know, they were trying to kind of spread out the jokes between certain characters and other characters, but some of them didn't land, some of them landed better than others. And I think when you're trying to force comedy in a film that doesn't necessarily need it, it throws the tone of the movie all over the map. And you also this is a science fiction film, and fantasy film, so the lore can be a little confusing to kind of grasp onto. And when you throw in comedy and jokes in there at the same time, you're kind of being pulled in so many other different directions, and it kind of ruins the storytelling and the connection the audience is going to have on the screen. And that's an issue that I had throughout the entire film. It's not all bad. There are aspects of this movie that really lived up to the fan experience, particularly the heart and the lore. Now, I am not a big Masters of Universe fan. I did play with the toys a little bit when I was a little kid, but this isn't necessarily a franchise that I was connected to. But from what I've heard, that this film really stuck to the lore and the identity of that original toy or animated series that was popular in the 80s. And I think that's a great thing for certain fans that were watching this in the theater, that there's some cameos in this movie from previous people who played this, that were in this franchise. They make appearances as well that live up to that fan experience, and I think the hardcore fans are going to love it. I don't think this is a film that traditional fans are going to love. I think it's very inside baseball, but it does have a great experience in terms of the action sequences and the visuals. Or some of them are good, some of them aren't. And overall, this movie is an interesting franchise that we hadn't seen in quite some time. This is a movie that has been a long time in the making, that a lot of fans have been waiting for quite some time to see. So overall, I'm going to give this film a 7.4 out of 10. It has some good parts, have some issues with it, but overall it does feel like a fun film if you want to see something different in terms of having a fantasy big budget film. If you like this film review, please leave a like, subscribe, and comment down below.